This is the Dallas Morning News.
Just a heads up, this episode contains references to domestic abuse and child abuse. Please listen with care. You know how anytime there is a strange and unexplained death out in the woods, especially outside a small town, it starts with all these rumors, and the rumors quickly grow into legend. These days, some of the legends of Christopher Whiteley's death outside Lipan are crazier than ever. Just to name one example, nearly 400,000 people have watched a YouTube video exploring whether Christopher was the victim of a real, honest-to-goodness werewolf.
This is one of the wildest cases of a death where those who point to a werewolf actually have the strongest argument by the facts in the case.
And remember how the medical examiner bleached Christopher's body, destroying any DNA evidence of the killer? Talk about a cover-up.
That's also why they destroyed the DNA on the body and destroyed the DNA on the genes, is because they had found something that isn't supposed to exist.
I know a lot of people really like talking about werewolves and Bigfoot or whatever, but that's never really been my thing. I just don't buy it. Remember what Christopher's dad said? He heard voices and a commotion inside the house on the morning Christopher was last seen. And then there's Christopher's friend Polly, who told authorities that people had been threatening him. Christopher's own girlfriend, Tyler, said Christopher had enemies all over the place.
He always has had enemies, everywhere, but this doesn't make sense.
If a mountain lion didn't kill Christopher and we don't believe in werewolves, why not another creature that's extremely prone to violence? Why not another human being? From Free Range Productions in association with the Dallas Morning News, this is Season 4 of the Unforgotten, Kill Site. I'm your host, Wes Ferguson, and this is Episode 5, The Shank. Here's something I've been wrestling with. How much of Christopher Whiteley's background do we need to get into? What's relevant to his story and what's not? Both of Christopher's parents have blamed law enforcement for not bothering to really investigate Christopher's death because they just didn't care. In other words, what's the death of one more criminal, a junkie? I don't know if his parents' argument is true or not, but if we're going to take their claims seriously, we kind of need to know what Christopher did that supposedly made law enforcement so indifferent to his death. Because Christopher Whiteley's public record paints a portrait of a life stalked by violence almost from the beginning.
The first thing we do is basically run a background check on anybody we're writing about, positive, negative, or otherwise.
This is reporter Charles Scudder again.
You know, the kind of salacious details about the death itself are one thing, but there's a person, right? There's a person there that we didn't know. And it was important for me, it's important for journalists to understand a little bit more about who this person was beyond the circumstances of their death. So that's where we started, is just a general background check on anything we could find. And pretty quickly, we found quite a bit.
During the course of Charlie's reporting for the Dallas Morning News, he actually came across Christopher's juvenile record, which is usually kept sealed.
If you are sent to juvie, to juvenile correctional facility, those records are not public, right? You're a minor. I wouldn't know anything that happened to Christopher before he turned 18. This document, because it lists everything, includes that past. And that's really telling, that it shows not just his adult life, but that his criminal life started from a very young age.
Christopher's juvenile record shows that he landed his first criminal charge, burglary of a building, when he was just 10 years old. That's also how old he was when he started smoking marijuana. 2 years later, Christopher was arrested for criminal mischief and he was put on probation.
The next year, he had 3 charges. So he was in and out of juvenile probation. Then in 2007, he is accused of indecency with a child, sexual contact.
We're not going to get into the specifics of the indecency charge, During my one phone call with Kimberly, she said the charge was taken out of context and Christopher didn't do anything wrong. But the records show that Christopher admitted to the abuse.
So he was sent to juvie for it.
And how old was he at that time?
He would have been 15 years old. There's another charge here from later that year for aggravated sexual assault of a child.
God, that's awful. And Kimberly brought that up and indicated to me that it was some kind of trumped up charge.
But again, according to this document, he admitted to it.
Is his juvenile criminal history relevant to the story?
I think it paints a particular picture of Christopher as, especially as it continues to escalate, right? We start with burglary of a building, but he keeps getting sent to probation. It escalates. It paints a violent picture.
Charlie found all these records in a report filed in 2015 by a caseworker who was seeking the emergency removal of the 2 children that Christopher had with his girlfriend, Tyler.
This affidavit, which again is trying to prove that it's an unsafe home, paints a really stark picture of a home that is full of violence, of abuse, and of drug and alcohol use. When the caseworker went to go interview Christopher, the notes say that Christopher mumbled most of his words. He was off topic throughout the interview. He talked about the sexual abuse charges against him. He said that there are registered sex offenders and history of mental illness in his family, and that he is diagnosed with explosive depression disorder and anxiety, that he was taking 2 different medications for it, but was off his meds, that he had run out and was off his meds. He went on to say, Whiteley stated he recently got really drunk off a whole bottle of whipped cream vodka and, quote, took an axe to his house. He said that Tyler had left with the children when he had started getting violent, but they were in the house at the time. At one point, Tyler and Christopher are both asked to take a drug test by this caseworker, and they ask, if I'm around people who use methamphetamines, will it show up? And the caseworker says, no, it won't show up if you were just around them, but if you used it, it will. And they declined to take the drug test.
Wow.
It lays out multiple different incidents where Christopher and Tyler are violent toward each other, toward other family members. It says specifically there's no signs of direct violence against the children necessarily. But that they are dirty, they're wearing old diapers, they're around this environment that's, again, full of smoke and violence.
I mean, and they're still teenage parents, right?
Yeah, Tyler's about a year younger. But yeah, they're at most 20, 21, 22.
Now, this isn't the most upsetting detail in the report, but it's up there. Is the allegation that Christopher hit Tyler in the back of the head with a pipe.
It's reported that she's currently has bruising from domestic violence by Christopher Whiteley. Drugs and alcohol are involved. And this is a really interesting find to me. Christopher Whiteley has a history of incarceration. It is unclear, but Christopher Whiteley may have ties to the Aryan Brotherhood or Aryan Nation.
The Aryan Brotherhood is a neo-Nazi prison gang and organized criminal syndicate. Christopher's family adamantly denies that he ever had anything to do with them, and there's not any real evidence in the public record that ties Christopher to the gang.
And I remember when I saw that, I kind of had to put it down for a second because it seemed like it's a very serious claim.
Right.
Right. If you know anything about the Aryan Brotherhood, it's not something you accuse someone of lightly. This isn't an official state document.
But it was kind of like vague, you said? It was just like, we've heard that?
Yeah, all it says is it is unclear, but Christopher Whiteley may have ties to the Aryan Brotherhood or Aryan Nation.
Did you ask anybody that knew Christopher, like his mom or anybody else, whether that claim had any validity?
I believe I asked his mom, and she said it was total crap. I also made sure to check, based on the medical examiner's documents, the police reports, and the photographs of Christopher's body. Another big piece is gang tattoos. I didn't see any. None were noted that were particularly that way.
Just to make that really clear, Christopher did not have any gang tattoos.
So Christopher and Tyler refused to get treatment for their drug abuse, and so
Yes.
the children were removed by court order, right?
Yes, that's basically what this document did. They tried to get Christopher and Tyler into treatment. They called treatment centers, got him a spot. He refused to go, and then Tyler refused to go. It ultimately came to a head basically when Tyler and Christopher made it clear that they were not going to seek treatment after CPS did everything they could to grease the wheels.
God, I mean, that's in the throes of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really sad.
It is. It's really sad, and it's clear everything in his life, in Tyler's life at this moment, was consumed by drugs and alcohol.
So they lose their two young children, their boy and their girl, and then I guess not terribly long after that is when Christopher gets arrested again, right?
Children were taken away. This affidavit was signed in September of 2014. By June of the next year is when Christopher was arrested and ultimately sent to prison.
And what did he do?
So this is kind of a tale.
Okay.
After the break, the shocking crime that finally lands Christopher in prison. So much of Christopher's life was defined by violence. Not the kind of violence that comes from a predator in the woods, but the human kind. The kind that leaves scars that don't show up on an autopsy report. And if we're going to find out what really happened to him, we need to understand that. Here's Charlie again.
On June 4th of 2015, Christopher Whiteley and Tyler Messina were living in a small home they were renting in Dublin, Texas, which is a small town. And that day, Whiteley called 911 and told them that Tyler had cut herself doing dishes and to send an ambulance. They took her to the hospital. While they were there, doctors called police, had them come talk to Tyler. Tyler told both medical staff and the police that Christopher had stabbed her and had abused her before. Her aunt told police that Christopher came to pick her up and told the police at that time that Christopher had tied her up in the bathroom for days without food or water. When they talked to Tyler, she said that she had been beat with electrical cords and poked with knives in the past. And she said that in this particular assault, Christopher had made a shank out of a tree trimmer and an X-Acto knife and slashed her on her right wrist.
I have a hard time visualizing that. Tapes up the X-Acto knife to the end of the tree trimmer?
I have trouble as well understanding that. It's described as there was a tree trimming device and an X-Acto knife that was used in the assault. Officers discovered the tree trimming device that had been taken apart in the center and could be used as a shank. And then they found the X-Acto knife with blood on it. So I can't quite picture it myself, but it's again, like, I can't picture that.
Yeah.
I can't picture what drives someone to do that, but also like the thing itself, the weapon itself. And yeah, this becomes a tipping point where before, especially in the affidavit from CPS, Tyler mentioned some of this violence, some of this abuse, but is kind of, oh, it's nothing. I fell on this time. Whatever happened, kind of downplaying it.
Mm-hmm.
This is a moment where she's telling police and medical staff the extent of the abuse, and it's tough.
And this is what sends him to prison.
Yeah. So he was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. He pled guilty and was sentenced to 5 years in prison and about $2,000 in fines and fees.
Mm-hmm.
After Christopher was arrested, after he pled guilty, both he and Tyler signed documents with the court to voluntarily terminate their parental rights. So the children have been taken away. Christopher has been sent to prison, and both parents voluntarily sign these documents to hand over custody to the state of Texas.
When I talked to his mom, Kimberly, and maybe to his sister also, said it's not my intention to just drag his name through the mud again. Mm-hmm. I know that it was really, it hurt for Christopher's loved ones to read your stories where you're just laying out the facts. He was accused of this. He was convicted of that. He lost the children. He had this, long history of drug abuse. I feel like it's important to say that it's not our intent to just, blame the victim, run him through the mud. But why do you think that it is relevant? And specifically in context of the local law enforcement knew about Christopher and how they possibly approached this investigation of his death?
I've really thought about that a lot. And I'm glad you asked, because I knew it would be something difficult for the family. And we do have, cultures that don't speak ill of the dead. And I don't think that's what we're doing here necessarily. What we're trying to do is understand what led Christopher to that moment in that trailer and how he ended up there, right? I think the fact that he had gotten clean in prison and was starting a new life is relevant. It also becomes extremely relevant when this is certainly something that Christopher's family has brought up. The idea that if this was a known property to the sheriff's office, if this was a known individual or group of individuals, that, to put it bluntly, if the attitude was, oh, it's just another drug user we don't need to worry about, why should we spend the resources on this investigation for someone like that? And that's a problem. That's a miscarriage of justice, if that's the case.
From what you know about small town law enforcement in Texas, I mean, is that even plausible that law enforcement might have that mentality?
I think it's plausible. It's really difficult to, to understand what someone's thinking in a given moment, right? And even if they tell you, you don't know if that's really what they think or believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we'll ever really know exactly why this was given such little scrutiny. What we do know is that it was given very little scrutiny. I also think that this is such an important accountability story as well. If this could happen to someone like this, who's to say it couldn't happen to somebody else?
Right.
Right. And who's to say if you, get in an argument with the sheriff, they're not going to pay it as much attention if you die. If that's the way that these investigations are being treated. He, was adjudicated through the courts. And more importantly, through a lot of this, he was in the throes of addiction. Mm-hmm. That kind of all-consuming, devil on your shoulder. I'm not excusing it. I'm not excusing domestic abuse. I'm not excusing any of his actions. But again, you have to have them in context. For what he did, he should have been convicted, and he was sent to prison, and he served a sentence, and he got out. And that doesn't mean that he gets to get killed.
With so much violence in his past and into these explosive, violent episodes, we don't know what happened on the morning that he was last seen at that house, but it could make sense that he could have been involved in some kind of severe violence with whoever else was there that day that we don't know about.
Yeah, again, I'm not a cop, but, I've read enough Sherlock Holmes and watched enough CSI to know, okay, you've got this past, at least look into it.
Yeah.
Especially when you have scientists saying that your leading theory is physically impossible. Again, I think when I mentioned that shank, right, the X-Acto knife and tree trimming thing, that also was interesting to me because, again, I don't know what made that wound on Christopher's neck, but it's not a common tool, right? So the fact that there's this violent history with unusual weapons also rose an eyebrow for me. The idea that there's this makeshift shank, and then again, You look at the photos and it left such a strange mark, which is also something Our Brotherhood does.
No, is it really?
Well, yeah, part of their kind of notoriousness is the gruesome lengths they go to when they do kill somebody, which is part of why, we were really cautious about going out to Lipan.
You didn't want to get shanked by a tree trimmer.
I didn't want to get shanked by a tree trimmer or strung up.
After the break, Charlie starts poking his nose around Lipan, the little town where Christopher was killed, and things get really weird. During his reporting, Charlie drove out to Lipan with a photographer from the Dallas Morning News.
We stuck out like a sore thumb real bad when we were driving around taking pictures of stuff. It's not easy to be incognito. We drove out to the property where Christopher died. We didn't go onto the property. We didn't have permission to go onto the property, so we did not. But we parked by the creek.
Remember that dry creek was in the woods next to the house where Christopher had been staying with his girlfriend, Tyler.
Christopher's body was found on the other side of the creek. So this creek is somewhere where large mammals might, hunt or hang out. So it was an important place that the officials looked for things like trail or scat or whatever. So we went down to that creek, and I remember I think it was springtime, but it was like an unseasonably hot day. And it was so still. It was a little freaky. Like there weren't any bugs. Normally you hear some bugs or crickets or something. There was no noise. It was just still and quiet, and the water was barely moving, and it just kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies. And so me and the photographer, we got what we needed. And as we were driving around, we started noticing the same pickup drive back and forth past us. And we continued, poking around, taking pictures. And again, in public property, we weren't hiding who we were. We had badges on, the whole thing. But then we noticed the car was coming back and the bed was full of men.
What?
The bed of the truck. Yeah, it was full of men. And they were coming toward us with what looked like a cop car behind them. And so we got in the car and left. And they followed us back onto the main highway all the way out. And we passed the Welcome to Lipan sign. And they stopped, do a 3-point turn, and go back into town.
God, that's like something out of a B movie.
Yeah, right. Exactly. As like the first or second pass, I was like, okay, they're trying to see what we're up to. But then when we saw them coming with backup, it was like, all right, time to GTFO.
Yeah.
So that's we did not go back after that.
To my knowledge, Lipan doesn't really have a reputation as a sketchy place, but what I'd heard about Christopher's last days, the way the sheriff's office seemed to sweep his death under the rug, and Charlie's own story about his visit to Lipan had me feeling kind of intimidated. But I also knew that I could only find out so much by reading documents and making phone calls, especially when almost nobody would talk to me. I had to put boots on the ground, knock on some doors, and see what I could shake loose. I also needed to do everything I could to let Tyler share her side of the story. Charlie had tried too, and he had actually exchanged some messages with her.
I never was able to get her on the phone, but we did text back and forth quite a bit.
What did y'all text about?
So at the beginning, I was just trying to get to know her, right? Like, she was an important character in the story. I wanted to know what her memories of Christopher were. She was with him that night, so I wanted to know what she remembered from that night, those kinds of things. Wanted to set up a time to call. She would say, sure, that time sounds great. Then I would call and she wouldn't answer. Or then she would call and I would miss the call, that kind of thing. But it would be at weird times, like 2:00 in the afternoon. I would say, hey, when would this be a good time? And she would say, well, I just woke up. So how about in a couple hours? And I would call in a couple hours and nothing, that kind of thing. She lost my number at some point. I forgot who I was. I had to reintroduce myself. Should I just read part of this?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I said, this is Charlie Scudder with the Dallas Morning News. I'm working on a story about Christopher. She said, hey, sorry, been really rough on me here lately. I said, there's no need to apologize. I'm sorry to hear that, though. Are you okay? I was worried about her at that point. She said, is anyone really okay after they lose the love of their life, the father of my children, and my high school sweetheart? LOL, I'm trying to be, at least. It is what it is, I guess. When he left, a whole part of me left, too. I still can't sleep for shit, and I stay cooped up in my room 24/7. And I told her that was part of what I wanted to hear about. I wanted to hear about how difficult it had been for her in these months since, and asked if we could catch up the next day because it was late in the evening at that point. And she said, yeah, very much so. And then never heard back from her.
I assume you tried and she just didn't. She stopped responding.
Yes.
Well, what's your takeaway from all that?
They had a raucous relationship. They had a very violent relationship. And I don't know. I know that in relationships with abuse, there can still be a deep feeling of love. And I think that's what she's expressing there. It's another one of those things that this case just surprises you no matter which way you look at it. And it's one of those where it's impossible that everyone I spoke to is telling the truth.
Did it seem sincere to you?
It seemed sincere. It seemed like she was clearly going through something very, very difficult. It certainly felt like she was struggling with something. Emotionally, mentally, with substance. I don't know. I just don't know.
Gosh, we've talked so much about Christopher being the victim, and obviously he was. But what about Tyler in all this? She had been through so much, both when Christopher was still alive and then when he died. At the same time, her behavior on the day that Christopher disappeared still just didn't add up. When Christopher's mom texted her asking if she'd seen Christopher, Tyler said they were napping together, but Christopher had been gone for hours. Christopher, on his last morning, I think they said that they had partied till like 4 a.m. But when Chris called his dad to come pick him up, that call was made at around 7 a.m. And they're talking, and then there's some commotion, and Chris says, hold on, I got to go deal with these people, and hangs up. It's like, what was that noise? Who were those people?
Yeah, we have no clue who else was on the property, near the property, which also leads to these unanswered, uninvestigated questions that were just ignored. So many unanswered questions. I'd heard that Tyler had changed phone numbers, and then I heard that she was still living on the same property where Christopher was killed. I knew what I had to do. I had to go to Lipan myself.
So I'm just telling you, be careful when you go out there to talk to these people because they're fucking nuts.
That's next time on The Unforgotten.
He come down and talked to me that night, and then the next day, the car was gone. I don't know if they left him there. All of a sudden I hear he was attacked. They found his body out in the woods. They found blood and all. And then after that, I hear that they're accusing Tyler of getting rid of him.
Thank you for listening to The Unforgotten. To dig deeper into the story and see photos, case files, and more, check out our newsletter at unforgottenpod.com. The Unforgotten is a free-range production. Season 4, Kill Site, was produced here at Free Range in association with the Dallas Morning News. Editing by Aislinn Gaddis. Sound design and audio engineering from Austin Sisler with Eastside Studios. Charlie Scudder and I are executive producers. Special thanks to Morgan O'Hanlon. Don't forget, unforgottenpod.com. See you soon.